Today, it feels like the perfect moment to revisit the production of a film that, at the height of its creator's fame, was driven by three people who had completely lost the plot. The result was a budget that spiraled into a number so unreasonable it stopped feeling real. This kind of thing tends to happen to people who achieve massive success, and Hollywood has always been full of them. After the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, Gore Verbinski became one of the most powerful directors in Hollywood. Every door was open, every pitch was greenlit, and studios were more than happy to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at anything with his name attached. His first project after Pirates was the animated film Rango, which came with a hefty $135 million budget. It wasn't a box office phenomenon, but critics and audiences loved it. And by the end of the year, Rango very predictably walked away with the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. And then came The Lone Ranger. The project itself wasn't new. Back in the early 2000s, it had been developed at Sony, with Jonathan Mostow, fresh off Terminator 3 and Breakdown, attached to direct. The idea was a straightforward, crowd-pleasing Western adventure in the vein of The Mask of Zorro, with a planned budget of $70 million. The script by David and Janet Peoples, who had previously worked on Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys, failed to satisfy the studio for reasons that were never fully clarified. When Loretta Kalogridis was brought in to fix it and couldn't, Sony quietly walked away from the project. It likely would have stayed buried in development hell if Gore Verbinski, having wrapped Rango, hadn't remembered how much he loved the Lone Ranger TV series as a child. The original show aired from 1949 to 1956 and ran for 5 seasons. That personal nostalgia was enough for Disney to quickly buy the rights and fast-track the project into production. Johnny Depp and producer Jerry Bruckheimer soon followed, reuniting with Verbinski after their highly successful collaboration on Pirates of the Caribbean. The existing script, designed around a $70 million budget, was discarded without even being read because $70 million was simply considered pocket change for people of this stature. The irony here is hard to miss. The Pirates franchise itself was originally conceived as a blend of The Mask of Zorro and The Mummy. Nevertheless, Verbinski and Bruckheimer clearly believed that Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott, the writers brought in to start from scratch, would deliver something similar, just louder, bigger, and more expensive. After all, Rossio and Elliott had written Pirates of the Caribbean in 2003 and The Mask of Zorro back in 1998. With no real creative limitations placed on them, their script transformed The Lone Ranger into a sprawling blockbuster, with a projected budget of $250 to $270 million. At this point, Disney finally stepped in as the adult in the room. These numbers were far beyond what the studio was willing to tolerate, and the filmmakers were asked to scale things back. The script went through revisions, and much of the fantasy-heavy material was removed, including attacks by hordes of werewolves, a zombie apocalypse, and similar excesses. Even then, further reductions proved impossible, so Verbinski, Bruckheimer, Johnny Depp, and Armie Hammer agreed to cut their salaries. For Depp, this meant lowering his fee for the role of Tonto from the $25 million he initially wanted to his usual $20 million. The hope was that the film could be kept within a $170 to $175 million budget. That hope didn't last long. Verbinski rejected every Wild West town offered by the studio, finding them all insufficiently authentic, which led to an entirely new town being built from scratch in the middle of the desert. He then decided that CGI trains looked fake, so real 19th century steam locomotives were constructed, along with several miles of actual railroad track. These were not props or scale models, but fully functional trains. Unsurprisingly, this pushed the budget up to roughly $220 million, making The Lone Ranger one of the most expensive films of 2013. Since the production was troubled and the ballooning budget quickly became public knowledge, the film attracted intense media scrutiny. Coming so soon after Disney's catastrophic failure with John Carter in 2012, The Lone Ranger was inevitably compared to it. After the film's release, this comparison became the filmmakers' primary complaint. According to them, journalists had created a negative narrative long before the movie reached theaters, and many reviews focused less on the film itself and more on its price tag and behind-the-scenes chaos. Johnny Depp even suggested that many reviews were written months in advance, claiming that some critics simply recycled their John Carter talking points without bothering to update them. Regardless of the narrative, the final result was hard to ignore. With a budget of $215 million, The Lone Ranger earned only $260 million worldwide. According to industry insiders, Disney's losses ranged from $100 to $150 million. Furious over the runaway budget, Disney immediately terminated its long-standing relationship with Jerry Bruckheimer, continuing to work with him only on Pirates of the Caribbean sequels, largely because he retained certain rights to the franchise. Bruckheimer's career quickly lost momentum, pushing him toward television projects of uneven quality and films like Gemini Man. And in this case, it's difficult to fully blame Disney. In the years leading up to The Lone Ranger, Prince of Persia had underperformed, The Sorcerer's Apprentice had flopped outright, and both suffered from similar budget control issues. Even the fourth Pirates film failed to meet expectations and received lukewarm reviews. Today, Bruckheimer is doing what many fallen Hollywood power players do, returning to familiar territory. Financially, the strategy has worked, as the third and fourth Bad Boys films performed strongly at the box office. Bruckheimer, who has always openly mocked negative reviews, still insists that time will vindicate The Lone Ranger, arguing that it will eventually be re-evaluated as a misunderstood classic, much like Blade Runner. The film's failure also impacted Johnny Depp's career, as he received a comparable paycheck only on Transcendence, a project he signed onto while still working on the Western. The biggest casualty, however, was Gore Verbinski. Before The Lone Ranger, studios lined up at his door with scripts in hand. After such a spectacular failure, those lines disappeared almost overnight. 4 years later, he returned with the smaller thriller, A Cure for Wellness, which cost $40 million and earned just $26 million at the box office. And only 10 years after that disappointment, Verbinski finally returned with his next project, Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, scheduled for release in February 2026, a film whose prospects for now remain decidedly uncertain. So what do you think? Was The Lone Ranger always destined to crash? Or did everyone involved just collectively lose their minds? Let us know in the comments. That was Frameback. See you on the next Rewind.